today's goal is to make it out into the backyard. Actually, well, if you set small goals, then it's fairly easy to achieve your goals if you're goal oriented. But what we want to try and do today is to get those belts on, because that's really the critical thing. Once we've done that, we can put the plates on and go and get some fuel, because, well, there's a bit of logic behind that. Let me look. See this here? This is the Osmo Pocket 3. So I'll be using this a bit today because it's a bit easier to kind of poke it into everywhere. Now, it's not normally this long. Let me show it to you. There's my faithful assistant today. That's it all, by the way, that I've got. I bought that some time back for an oil change for the other Troopy and never used it. This is the Osmo Pocket 3, but it's kind of modular. So this bottom part is in fact just the that's just the tripod legs. This part here is the backup battery, and that's the unit itself. But the whole lot clips together like so, so that it can sit. It's really quite a genius device, actually, and I like using it. The sound is not as good as this camera, which is the Lumix S5, which is the one that I usually use. Not sure where she's off to, but she might have got a fright. Millie's taking off. She's a bit spooked. I don't know whether it's the it's overcast, and that always kind of gives her the willies, because she thinks it's raining, and rain and thunder go together, and it's the thunder that actually seems to spook her. So I'm not sure where she's off to. Anyway, look, what we're going to do today is to take off this cowl and that fan. That way then we can easily get to those belts. I believe this here, one of these, will loosen that idler pulley and enable me to take that belt off. And then the alternator is right down under here. And it was at that moment it started to rain. You know, it's remarkable, because I did check the forecast today and it said that it was for cloudy weather, but no mention of rain. Maybe I should have taken more notice of Millie, because of course she's done the bolt, and of course she will the moment it looks like rain. But she's just accurately predicted it by about 10 minutes or so. Anyway, look, what I have spotted is that there's only about half a dozen bolts at most. The radiator overflow tank needs to come off, and then there's, I think, 4 bolts holding that cowl on, and then it's 4 nuts that are holding the fan on while it is raining, and I really can't do anything. Well, I could, I suppose, but I don't fancy getting wet. The reason that I'm going to focus on the belts is that there's paired belts for the belt that runs between the crankshaft and the alternator and water pump, and one of those is missing completely, and the other one is squealing when I start it. So the last thing I want is for that to bust, and therefore there'll be no fan, no alternator, and no water pump. The other one is in good shape, which is the one that runs between the crankshaft and the air conditioning compressor. It doesn't really matter if we lose that, but that's actually in pretty good shape. So what I want to do is to replace all 3, and the only way to do that is to pull off that cowling and to pull off the fan at the same time, because that will then allow me to be able to pull the belts off the front. And the reason for that is because then I feel safe driving it. I can put the plates on, I can take it down to the servo, and I can put fuel in it. Now the fuel that's in there is only in the front or main tank, and it's the fuel that I put in there a year and a half ago. Now while diesel doesn't really get stale, it's probably best to freshen it up with some additional diesel. Plus the rear tank has no fuel in it at all, so I want to make sure that I put some, at least some, in that half a tank or something like that. So the point is that if putting fresh fuel in and putting fuel in the rear tank for the first time in who knows how long stirs up some sediment and it ends up in the filter, I'd rather it ended up in the old filter before I take it off than in the new filter after I put it on. So I'll do that, then I can change the filters once I've had a bit of a run in it with those belts on. Anyway, we'll go and get ourselves a cuppa, I think, seeing as we've been rained off the job site. So we've got the radiator overflow bottle off from here, and that enables us to get to these. There's 1, 2, and a third one way down the bottom there. Look, this is what we've been using. Remember I spoke to you some time back about this really cheap $35 kit that I got? And I've just been using those, but also this incredible tool, which once again I showed you, but which is just a Tool Pro. It didn't cost very much at all, but ideal for getting into those spaces where normally you'd have to try and squeeze in a ratchet. So nothing is ever easy when it comes to cars, naturally. So while I've got the bolts loosened and or taken out on the cowling, I haven't removed it completely because I wanted to try and loosen the nuts on the fan hub, except they don't want to be loosened, and there's no possible way that I can get in there, and I'll show you that in just a moment, with enough leverage, because if I try to just pull on it, it turns the whole fan hub rather than undoes the nut, and so I need to get in there and shock it with a hammer, but I can't really get a hammer in there and shock it. So there's one solution, and that of course is to remove the radiator. Now we spoke about that earlier and then suggested that maybe we didn't need to do it, but I think that if we do remove the radiator, then there's plenty of room from in front to be able to get in there with a hammer and whack a spanner to try and shock those nuts free. So, however, it's now 4:30 and we know it's going to get dark within the next half an hour or so, so I don't want to start it. What I might do is just remove the grill cover, because I need to get that off in order to get one of the bolts which is holding the radiator. It's a process of slowly dismantling the car until you end up with nothing. That's those nuts way down there on that fan hub. You can see them in there, and they're just very tight, not really possible to get enough leverage in there. I don't really have a long enough spanner to be able to do that, and even trying ganging spanners doesn't work very well because they slip around a fair bit. So off with the grill. Grill is off. It's just 4 screws, one there, and the same on the other side, and then it just lifts off. And the bolts that we need to get to for the radiator are there, and there, and there. This wiring here, which is for this light bar, we'll just cut and reroute, because it's a bloody silly idea to have it sitting over the top of there where it can get busted anyway. So it really all should go in the same place, so we'll just redo that wiring. Anyway, look, we'll pack up, but doing it this way does mean that we will be able to get to the radiator, we'll be able to give it a good flush, we'll be able to replace those hoses, or at least check that the ones that are on there are fine, and just keep the others as spares, or vice versa. But that's a job for tomorrow. Look, what occurred to me is that if I take out the radiator and the shroud, I don't actually need to take off the fan, because I can just pull the belts over it. So let's go and have a look and see what we need to do. First of all, obviously, is to just disconnect that wiring I was talking about, and then drain the radiator. So to get to the radiator, we're going to have to pull off that cover. Can you see it there? And remember I said about these wires, well, they don't actually go anywhere. This one goes to the negative, but this one's just hanging down underneath. There. You see that? That's not doing anything at all. Let's see if we can get it out. It's actually connected to, one wire is connected to that, and then it's spliced. So that's the spliced end. So, and this, my friends, is what causes fires in cars. You know, it's wiring like that that is really poorly done, not appropriately tied up or tied out of the way, and you get a short circuit and boom. This is the stone guard, or whatever you want to call it, that sits underneath, that protects the radiator and probably the front of the sump. With that off, I can just take out the bung and let that radiator drain. I've got to take off the hoses, and I'll also undo that cowling top hose, and I'll probably just undo it at this end and pull that out of the way. I don't really need to. Well, we'll see. And then bottom hose I'll need to get out from underneath. You can see it way down there. We've actually done remarkably well. We've only dropped one nut, and that was off here. Now it turns out there's actually 6, so there's one more left there. There's one there, which we got off. It's actually a nut, and then one there, which is a bolt, and then there's these two on the top. Can you see those? There and there, and then we should be able to lift it out. Well, we got the radiator out. We've got the cowl off. I think I might still have a go at getting that fan off because there's a fair amount of room in front of it now. So I should be able to get something in there and give it a whack with a hammer to try and break the lock on those nuts. There's always a risk when you do, not necessarily those, but when you're undoing nuts like these ones here, for example, for the radiator, that you'll bust something, and so I don't use an impact wrench. I just used a socket set to break the grip that they have. After they've been on for a while, they sort of lock, but it's looking pretty good. Everything's come apart. Nothing's really fallen apart yet, apart from dropping a nut, which I did find with the help of a magnet. We've got everything that we started with. She must be telling me it's time to go. You know how I was saying the other day that she's managed to predict the rain? Now I think she's predicting that it's time for a cuppa. Sounds like that's what she's saying to me. So let's wrap up, and we'll come back tomorrow if it's not raining, and see about getting those belts off. We'll just take a break from the tools and popped into Super Cheap to pick up some coolant. And coolant, like oils and other stuff now, seems to come in a whole variety of different formulations with the standard, you know, and possibly the original green coolant to blue to pink to purple and quite possibly lavender. I have no bloody idea, and I don't even know what the difference is, to be perfectly honest. I think they say for Toyotas they recommend for the later model ones the red, and then there was the pink, but it had green in it, and I do understand that sometimes they're not always compatible for whatever reason, and I think with the age of the vehicle it's probably always had the green one in it, so that's what I went and got. And Super Cheap has this kind of Tuesday Mania thing, or whatever the hell it's called, whereby you often get a discount on Tuesdays, so I took advantage and got 20% off 2 5-litre containers of the pre-mixed rather than the concentrate. So when we get the radiator flushed, the block flushed, and back in again, we can top it up with fresh coolant, and that'll be it for at least the next few years anyway. Anyway, just heading home. Well, we popped out and picked up that coolant this morning, and then it did rain this afternoon. Now just take a look at this sky. Pretty impressive, huh? So we haven't done anything to the car other than collecting the coolant this morning. Let's recap where we're up to. So we got the cowl off, and the radiator off, the grille, that's that stone protector or bash plate, and the radiator overflow. And I've even been thinking about removing the bull bar, giving it a bit of a clean up and putting it back on. It's just about due to be chucked out, to be perfectly honest, because there's quite a bit of rust in it. Can you see in there that there's rusted out? And while it's got this area here, which you'd probably need to cut out with a grinder for a winch, I don't think it's actually strong enough for one given that there's no heavy steel plate in there for mounting one. So we might have to look at something else for that front. And that's that bird's nest of wiring that was supposedly onto the this light bar. And the other thing we'll do, of course, obviously, is to flush out the engine block, running fresh water through it, and also the radiator. Give everything a good clean up.